Elon Musk built xAI as his rebel AI lab, a $200 billion juggernaut designed to challenge OpenAI and Google with Grok, the unfiltered chatbot powered by X's real-time chaos. It was the pure play bet on Musk's AI genius. No cars, no rockets, just models and compute. Then, overnight, it's gone, folded into SpaceX. No cash, all stock. xAI doesn't just lose independence, it becomes a line item inside a rocket company prepping the biggest IPO since, well, ever. The lab that was supposed to outthink the world now answers to launch schedules and satellite revenue. And why? Because xAI's GPU bills were becoming absurd. SpaceX has Starlink cash flow, orbital ambitions, and $1 trillion war chest. Suddenly, AI plus space isn't a pitch deck dream. It's rockets with brains, satellites beaming training data, and Starlink funding the next Grok. But here's the twist nobody's talking about. This isn't just Musk shuffling deck chairs. It's the blueprint for what comes next. Frontier labs don't stay standalone. They get swallowed by whoever controls the pipes, the power, and the physics. OpenAI has Microsoft. Anthropic splits Google and Amazon. Now xAI has SpaceX. The age of the independent AI lab just died. SpaceX just killed xAI, at least as an independent company. In early 2026, Elon Musk folded his AI startup into his rocket and satellite giant in what's billed as the biggest merger ever done by a private company. On paper, the combined group is worth over $1 trillion and turns SpaceX from a launch and satellite business into an all-purpose space and intelligence platform. The deal is all stock, so there's no cash, just Musk swapping one chunk of his empire for another. Officially, the move is framed as aligning AI with humanity's future in space. In practice, it means xAI's future, its models, investors, and capex needs are now all wrapped inside SpaceX's balance sheet. For anyone who thought xAI might be the independent, pure-play alternative to OpenAI or Anthropic, that dream ended the moment this merger document got signed. Before the merger, xAI was the odd one out in Musk's portfolio. SpaceX built rockets, Tesla built cars and batteries. X was the messy social network in the middle. And xAI was supposed to be the focused AI lab. Musk set it up after his very public split with OpenAI, pitching xAI as a safety-conscious, truth-seeking alternative that wouldn't be controlled by big tech. Its first public product, Grok, leaned heavily on real-time data from X and marketed itself as the chatbot that wouldn't filter the world through a corporate PR department. Investors liked the idea of getting exposure to Musk's instincts in AI without taking on Tesla's manufacturing risk or SpaceX's launch schedule. That separation mattered. xAI could raise money, hire researchers, and cut compute deals without being constrained by the priorities of rockets or cars. At least that was the plan. The turning point came once it became clear just how expensive xAI's ambitions really were. Training Grok-class models meant burning through vast GPU budgets, and rumors of multi-billion-dollar funding rounds started to swirl. At the same time, SpaceX was edging towards a long-anticipated public listing, with secondary share sales implying a valuation that put it in the same league as the biggest listed companies in the world. Rather than run two parallel capital raises, one for rockets, one for AI, Musk chose to simplify the story. Overnight, the messaging flipped from xAI as a separate frontier lab to xAI as the brain inside SpaceX. The merger announcement effectively told investors, you want exposure to Musk's space monopoly and his AI bet, you buy the same equity. It's neat, it's dramatic, and it leaves xAI's original investors holding paper tied directly to the rocket business. Underneath all the branding, this is really a compute story. xAI's roadmap demands truly obnoxious amounts of GPU time and power, and those bills don't pay themselves. Folding xAI into SpaceX ties its AI workloads to the Starlink and satellite infrastructure that SpaceX already controls. You can easily imagine orbital data center concepts being dusted off, with Starlink beams carrying training data between ground stations and low Earth orbit compute. Even without sci-fi hardware, the combination helps in more mundane ways. Starlink revenue can support long-term GPU leases. SpaceX's relationship with governments and defense customers make it easier to pitch dual-use AI systems. And internal tools for launch, trajectory planning, and satellite scheduling become testbeds for xAI models. Seen through that lens, the merger is less about vibes and more about locking in a dedicated, vertically integrated compute pipeline that doesn't doesn't depend on renting everything from rival hyperscalers. On the surface, a rocket company buying an AI lab looks like empire building for its own sake, but there is a strategic logic you can at least understand. SpaceX already operates incredibly complex systems: launch cadence, collision avoidance, satellite constellations, ground networks, defense contracts. These are exactly the kinds of problems where powerful models and agents could automate planning, anomaly detection, and even negotiations over spectrum and orbits. At the same time, Musk has been explicit for years that he sees AI as both an existential risk and a competitive necessity. Controlling his own model stack means not being at the mercy of OpenAI, Google, or anyone else when it comes to the software that runs on Starlink or future Mars missions. So while space plus AI sounds like a pitch deck buzzword, there is a coherent idea underneath it. Turn SpaceX into the physical shell and xAI into the digital nervous system. From xAI's perspective, this is a trade-off. On the plus side, it now sits inside a company with far deeper pockets, diversified revenue, and a long track record of pulling off insane engineering projects that looked impossible on paper. SpaceX has experience negotiating with regulators, militaries, and telecoms, all useful when you're deploying powerful models into sensitive domains. xAI's researchers get a ready-made sandbox of real-world problems, from rocket telemetry to global internet traffic. The downside is subtle but important. Independent labs can play multiple partners off against each other, raising from different cloud providers, sovereign funds, and corporates without being captured by any one of them. Inside SpaceX, xAI's priorities are automatically downstream of launch schedules, Starlink profitability, and whatever else is on Musk's mind that quarter. It stops being a freestanding actor in the AI ecosystem and becomes a strategic department in a much larger machine. This merger also cranks up single-person risk. Before, if you didn't like how Musk ran xAI, you could in theory avoid it and still invest around the rest of his world. Buy Tesla, back other labs, work with different launch providers. Now, the biggest privately held space company and one of the most ambitious frontier labs are literally the same corporate entity, chaired by the same person, whose public statements can move markets in both directions. That's great if you believe in the genius founder archetype and want maximum exposure to his judgment. It's less great if you worry about governance. Past decisions, from tweeting funding claims to sudden management changes, are now part of the risk profile for a company that might one day be systemically important infrastructure. The control stack is cleaner, but it's also more fragile because there are fewer independent checks on how these assets get used. For investors, this move quietly changes the menu. A lot of early interest in xAI came from people who wanted a direct, concentrated way to bet on Musk's AI instincts without touching rockets or cars. After the merger, that purity is gone. Any future listing or liquidity event will likely be SpaceX paper, not a separate xAI stock. So your AI exposure becomes entangled with launch economics, Starlink churn, satellite failure rates, and whatever long-term capex plans the combined group dreams up. Some investors will love that. They get a diversified Musk conglomerate in one line item. Others will hate it, preferring the cleaner, more comparable exposure they get from backing OpenAI, Anthropic, or the next frontier lab directly. The interesting question is whether capital that would have gone into an independent xAI now flows to those rivals instead, simply because their stories are easier to underwrite. Zooming out, the SpaceX xAI deal is a signal flare for the wider AI arms race. We've already seen labs tangle themselves with cloud giants and telecoms just to secure enough compute. OpenAI with Microsoft, Anthropic with Amazon and Google, smaller labs with assorted GPU clouds and sovereign funds. xAI being absorbed by SpaceX says something slightly different, that frontier labs might increasingly end up inside industrial or infrastructure companies rather than sitting above them. Instead of AI company plus cloud provider, you get AI brain inside an integrated hardware network data empire. That raises the bar for anyone trying to compete from a standing start. It also hints at where value may accrue, not just in model weights, but in tightly controlled stacks where the same group owns the rockets, the satellites, the data pipes, and the models running on top. So, did SpaceX save xAI or quietly kill it as a standalone force? The honest answer is that it did a bit of both. On one hand, xAI now has the financial backing and industrial playground to do things a normal startup never could. If you're a researcher who wants your models flying on satellites or steering real robots, you've landed in paradise. On the other hand, the distinctive part of xAI's identity, an independent lab that could set its own agenda and negotiate its own alliances, is gone. Its success or failure will now be judged alongside launch cadence and satellite revenue, not purely on model quality or breakthrough ideas. The interesting part isn't just whether this was a good deal, but what it tells us about where AI is heading, away from scrappy labs towards being embedded inside a handful of gigantic, messy conglomerates. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy hearing about stories in tech and you want to support the channel, the best thing you could do is to like and subscribe this video. See you for the next one.